Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Um, will you permit me to start off by apologizing to you and also to our several viewers or participants for I don't know what language to use for it, what happened last week when due to technical issues, we couldn't have our program. We tried our best, but uh, even though it wasn't my fault, nor your fault, these glitches tend to happen from time to time. But still, we owe our participants a whole deck of apologies for what happened. Let me just put it that way.
Yes, sir. And just to add to that, we will be making some changes on our end. And for that reason, we will not be broadcasting next week as we make those changes. We tried to avoid that particular day, but unfortunately, we couldn't. But we'll be back the week after that, and by then we would have upgraded the different things that we need to upgrade to make sure that we do our best to avoid that kind of scenario in the future. But thank you, Prof, for being here, and thank you to the participants for being back here. I can see the list on YouTube now starting to show up. So thank you very much. And of course, before we go into the questions, do not forget to share the link, click subscribe if you haven't already clicked on subscribe, and let people know that we are live. Just before we go to the questions, last week I said I was going to address some of the points that we couldn't touch last week. We will address them this week. But I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on before we move ahead, sir.
Well, normally we don't discuss issues that I will say are domestic to Nigeria because we do have a global audience. Um, at the end of each program, each week, you tell me, well, some people from Canada, some from Brazil, India, that are queued in onto the show. So we do then tend not to localize the program. However, the tragedy that happened in Nigeria with the collapse of the 21-story building a few days ago definitely call for a comment or two uh, um, on our part, especially since when you had the tragedy in Lebanon, that explosion, if you recall, um, something that occurred because of people not carrying out their duties and laws not being obeyed. I recall me saying that in every low income and medium income country, they probably have this syndrome of not obeying regulations, cutting corners, uh, people being able to pull strings to avoid obeying rules and regulations. Yes, a 21-story building had collapsed. I will simply deal with the facts that are in the public domain. Or maybe I should say, I will deal with the non-facts as well. You heard the general manager, who has now been suspended, in whose department this building comes under, saying approval was only given for 15 levels, and yet 21 was built on it. And then the deputy governor comes on and says, no, approval was given for 21 levels. Who was telling the truth? So even at that moment, this is within 5 hours of the tragedy, the government could not even agree on, the government that gave the approval couldn't agree on how many levels. At one point, arising from complaints that were made, that place was shut down, construction was stopped, and yet within 24 hours, approval was given for construction to resume. And now, unfortunately, because we all have a culture of saying you shouldn't be critical of the dead. On the contrary, our religion says, rejoice with those who rejoice, and with those who mourn, mourn. The developer, the owner of the project, now is being confirmed as one of those who died, who was buried under the rubble. His body had been pulled out. So far, we have 35 bodies that have been pulled out. The point I just want to make is this. There is a proverb, probably in every civilization, which says, don't throw a stone into the marketplace because you don't know whether it is one of your relatives who is going to be hit by the stone. When you break regulations, when you cut corners, be it giving approval to a vehicle that is deficient in any particular area, or turning a blind eye at violations of rules and regulations, whether or of a plane, or, like in this case, a building construction, or as it happened in Lebanon, allowing explosives to be stored at the dockyard. When the consequences of the breakdown of these regulations occur, you don't know who the victims are going to be. It is our moral duty, even if not for our own interest, to ensure that we don't cut corners. The official who allows fake drugs to be brought into any country, does he know whether it is his child in school who has a headache to whom they will now buy a drug, not knowing that it is fake, to give to that child? Do they know? And one also doesn't know. So really, the responsibility to do things the way they are supposed to be done is not just because your religion says you should walk the straight path. It's because it is in the interest of the official giving the approval or withholding the approval, and it is in the interest of each one of us, including the political godfathers whom people run to when officials call them out for not obeying the law, and who then sanctions breaking the law. It could be his wife, his uncle, his son, who will now face the consequences of a breakdown of these regulations. It's a tragedy of major proportions. I would say, well, not up to the level of the Lebanese one, but a death is a death. Was it not to know that British poet who says, "No, ask not," who died? The death of each person diminishes all of us. It diminishes you, it diminishes me. And so I thought that it would be, I don't even know what word to use, for me to ignore this tragedy of this kind of proportions and go and talk about Afghanistan or Russia or Ethiopia. Yes, we will talk about all those, but this, what's happened in Nigeria, allows all of us to face this general moral doctrine that we all pay the price when we disobey the law. I just thought I would say that at the beginning of this program.
Thank you for that, sir. Quite touching there, actually. So, let's start today by talking about climate change. COP26 has started. We've had many national leaders talk about their views on climate change. They have gone as far as putting in some measures, agreeing certain things that they want to do to address the challenge of climate change. Sir, let us start with the speeches that some of these leaders gave, from the Queen to President Biden to the Prime Minister of the UK to some of the other countries there. What is your takeaway, sir, from what we have seen so far from COP26?
Well, I am ready to award Nobel Peace Prizes for speechwriters. Beautiful speeches were written. I doff my hat to the speechwriters. I also doff my hat to the deliverers of these speeches. They showed style, ranging from Her Majesty's royal style that we're used to the bullying style, the bulldog style of the British Prime Minister, to several heads of state had their own styles that commanded your attention. And there are a few phrases that are going to stay with those of us who pay attention to these things. One sentence in the speech of Her Majesty the Queen rang in my head. She said, when I'm sorry, I won't remember her exact words 100%. So for those who do fact check on these things, don't call me out for saying the Queen didn't use that word, but you'll get the picture. They said, when politicians think of today and put in place politics for today, that is politics. That's politician in action. But when they put policies in place for tomorrow, that is statesmanship. And obviously, one target that everybody seems to have agreed to is that the future of the youth is now our concern. It's almost as if everybody agrees that they've given up on us. Is the future, and that calls for statesmanship. And that struck me when Her Majesty said that. So we have a lot of ringing speeches made, but they've been at it now for, in fact, if you come from the G20, even though, again, the big boys didn't attend the G20, just like they are not attending this one, and you come here, yes, commitments have been made. But as the president of Kenya said, and there were other speakers who also said this, the commitments that were made before the Paris conference, 2015, I believe, have not been kept. They have not been kept. So who says the commitments that are being made now will be kept? Who says they will be kept? Number two, I like and I accept the idea that low-income and medium-income countries who have not contributed substantially to the climate debacle must get assistance, economic assistance from the high income countries. But what is not what's not clear to me is the economic assistance that is being offered loan, or is it outright grant? Because I believe it should be outright grant, because the medium income countries and low income countries are suffering from policies they did not contribute to. That's the second issue. The third one that struck me is that, because fortunately there have been documentaries behind the protocol sessions that we have had. And those documentaries show the contribution of huge industrial complexes to the climate debacle that we have. That is not the news, their contribution. The real contribution is that they knew what they were doing. They are scientists, in-house scientists of Mobil, of Exxon, drew their attention to this, and yet the CEOs went out to do two things: demonize those who are calling attention to the climate debacle and what was causing the climate debacle. They went out to demonize them and deny that anything was happening to the climate, to the earth climate, to human contribution to the climate disaster. They went out to deny it, just as they did over tobacco. I still remember, this tobacco barons turning up at parliamentary sessions, congresses, and denying that smoking tobacco was bad for one's health, that nicotine was bad for one's health, even though there were reports being done by their in-house scientists saying smoking cigarette was contributing to cancer and everything. The same thing for this climate. And I then came to the conclusion that actually we are not being ruled by politicians. In fact, I just believe that, if you like, we should abolish parliaments, congresses, and just have a collection of businessmen. Let us remove let us show who the real masquerade is. Remove the mask. Politicians are simply there being controlled by businessmen to rule our lives, and not for the better. So, yes, of course, targets are being there are targets being put forward to have zero emission. Commitments are being made to pay for switch from coal to electricity and what have you. But we are supposed to be aiming for 1.5% in order to reclaim the earth. If all the commitments that have been made in Glasgow are made, we will still be at 1.9. So I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. Any progress is to be welcomed. But I am not popping champagne at what has happened in Glasgow. I'll drink a glass of water.
Let's talk about one point that you raised slightly there, sir. You talked about what the president of Kenya said. And we also know that the president of South Africa, it's been announced that they are going away with about $8.5 billion of aid to help to reduce their reliance on coal. So, sir, we had some African leaders there. Did they represent Africa appropriately in terms of their contribution to climate change? And secondly, did they walk away with enough to justify whatever contribution they may be making in that setting?
Well, given the tone of speeches made, in fact, if the African leaders have not been there, I don't think anything will have been lost. I'm not saying this sarcastically. What I mean is that every president, every head of state said the correct things that needed to be said. It is moving from generalities to specifics that I have issues with. Even India promised that, you know, it will have zero emission by 2050. When people want zero emission by maybe 2030 or so, the Nigerians said 2060 that they would deal with, you know, they think they will achieve their own objective by 2060. So the leaders from Africa and other leaders from medium income countries didn't promise what they couldn't deliver. I think every head of state there, actually, if I can use the language of the president of Nigeria, who said nobody needs to come to Nigeria to preach climate degradation to us. We live it every day. So the, you know, spread of Sahara into Nigeria, the almost disappearance of Lake Chad from the size it was to what it is now. I mean, he said, so really, every leader said, we know it. We know it is happening. We know it's a danger to human existence and what have you. They all said it. From Her Majesty the Queen, from Biden, everybody said it.
One last question before we... Oh, sorry, sir.
No,
Go ahead,
sorry.
sir.
Yeah, you did ask me whether they got from it what they expected, and the answer, of course, is no. Is no. Commitments are made. Even then, those commitments are not sufficient. They are not sufficient. They are not program targeted. And let me say this, maybe because they didn't want to offend us. They've talked enough, I suppose, about corruption that they didn't want to offend us, or they didn't want to run the risk of leaders of developing countries say, return our stolen money because they are kept in your banks. They wanted to avoid that. I didn't hear anything being said about, even if those commitments in terms of aid to medium income countries and low income countries, even if that aid is made, whether, what will you put in place to ensure that they don't disappear into corrupt programs? Nobody said anything about that. Everybody has just been polite. So I would like to see, maybe this, I mean, they are still there. At the end of the day, there will be a program put in place to ensure that every dollar that is not only committed but delivered to climate programs will actually be spent on climate programs and not be diverted by politicians and bureaucrats.
All right, sir. Before we leave this, I want to ask one question. Russia and China were not there. Did it make a difference? President Biden said it was a big mistake. Was he right?
No, I don't think it was right. It wouldn't have made a difference. Governments, from my own experience, which I know very well, governments make decisions before leaving their countries to come to conferences. Presence at conferences don't affect anything. I mean, after all, India that showed up still said 2050. Do you think that its target of 2050 was decided at that conference, or that Modi had decided it before he left New Delhi? I don't think it wouldn't have made a difference, because those kinds of decisions are related, are taken bearing in mind their impact on the standard of living of your people, whether to contribute to unemployment or what have you. I mean, that's what Her Majesty the Queen meant when he said decisions taken now are influenced by politics, the next election, whereas decisions taken for the future, for the youth, that is statesmanship. And don't tell me that the people who gathered in Glasgow or those who didn't come are statesmen. They are politicians. They'll be thinking of the next election. And they will hope that, maybe the next government will take care of the problem. That's what, they talk about when they talk about kicking the can, down the road. The problem is too hot. It will affect them politically negatively. So they won't take that decision, and they'll hope somebody else will face it down the line.
Sir, let's move to a point about the United States. Now, in an interview on one of the media outlets recently, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Miley, said he was very concerned, or they found it very concerning, where China was in terms of China's military capability. And this was talking about the hypersonic weapon that had been developed by China. Now, this week, we also see an article that talked about the Royal Marines of the United Kingdom defeating the United States Army in a training exercise. To further compound things, Iran released a video where they said, hey, we caught the United States trying to steal our oil. Now, there may be propaganda or whatever on that one, but let's pick those first 2 points, sir. Is it pointing to the United States being weak in the capability they have? Because now you've been caught unawares. Now you've been defeated in a training exercise. What is your take on this situation, sir?
Well, I will even add one more thing to it. So we could wrap it up and address, because I think there is a major issue involved here. There was a satellite picture released of 3 deep silos being developed again in China. Silos that could launch missiles. And from the way they were constructed, they were still in the process of expanding them. Now, 2 issues immediately struck me when I saw those pictures. Obviously, these pictures were released by the American Space Agency. So they wanted us to know there's a political message that the Americans, Defense Intelligence Agency, wanted the world to know about China. Number 2, the Chinese who were doing the construction knew that there were American satellites up there who were busy scanning, all of developments all over the world. And so the Chinese wanted the Americans to know, knowing also that the Americans would release it to the world. The first objective, I think, of the United States releasing all this is because they want more money from Congress for their own program. You will recall that shortly before the last year of the Trump administration, Trump made a reference to a super secret American program development, arms development, that he said if the world were aware of what the Americans had achieved, the whole world will shake down to its foundation. He never said anything more about that. And I understand at that time that there were a lot of people in the American defense community who were very upset that Trump had released what was supposed to be a super secret. Of course, nobody challenges the president. He doesn't get fired for doing that kind of thing. Now, nobody has said anything about that American program. So I believe that releasing details of all of this and the release coming from the American side um, is simply targeting Congress to release more money for the for the military budget. And I will not be surprised if the budget under Biden gets skewed from social welfare programs now to again defense programs, and the military industrial complex again will be the beneficiary. They'll be very, very happy about it. The what I will be more worried about, what I'll be more worried about is this. Um, in fact, I think there is even a a fourth news item shortly within the past 48 hours that Russia has cut off gas to Europe and has moved troops towards its western border. Are they testing? Are they testing Biden for any sign of weakness? Are they testing him? Is there some maybe suspicion in Russia, in Iran, in China that Biden may be weak on defense because he has this psychological aversion to war, and that therefore they may want to find out how far they can push him? Is that also what is behind? I mean, I've said that on the American side, the motive is because they want more money from Congress. But on the side of those other protagonists, is it because they are testing Biden to see how far they can go? I don't know. The United States military, I think we should make a. I've always made a distinction anyway between personnel and technology. I think technologically, the United States is still first class. Technologically, fighting equipment, you still can't beat the Americans. But in terms of the skill of the men and the women in uniform, you cannot beat the British. So I'm sure I'm not surprised then that in the training session, in the training exercise between the British and the Americans, the British Marines, are showing the stuff of Bond 007. But the Americans, have all the have all the satellites and missile and rifle development, tank development. Oh, they have all those on their corner.
Yes, sir. Um, Sir, before we leave, you've talked about Russia there, and there's a point that I wanted to raise. With this military buildup, yes, they may be testing, but sir, with all this testing going on, we have the China India border, we have the US doing what the US is doing, and everybody testing hypersonic missiles. Russia has announced that they are also doing another hypersonic missile to be released in 2022. Sir, something is bound to go wrong somewhere very soon. That's going to cause an escalation. How do we avoid that?
I I understand your fears, and the fears should be taken on board by the people who are involved in all of this. But it is, we there was this fear when the age of atomic weapons came on board, that we were simply going to incinerate the whole world. Um, and that didn't happen because of the what we call the syndrome. MAD syndrome, mutual um, mutual something destruction. That is, that the moment it became obvious to the leaders that playing with atomic weapons, yes, mutual assured destruction, that the moment you start playing with atomic weapons, you are just going to destroy everyone, including themselves. The Russians and the Americans never went to war after the Second World War. I mean, I'm not implying that they fought the Second World War against each other, they were on the same side. But there's been no global war since the Second World War, simply because the weapons available to both sides were sufficient to destroy everybody. So it is possible then that all this development of hypersonic missile is to ensure that no one again gets the edge over others. China has now joined. What happened during the atomic period was, of course, that wars were engineered among their surrogates, their supporters, but but those wars stayed local. They never went global. So I think that I think that there will be caution, caution in the various defense departments as regards the kind of damage that will be done to. I mean, we are worried about, climate, uh, climate catastrophe and so on. If those things go out of hands, we don't need to worry about climate catastrophe. There will be no earth to worry about. Both the earth and the inhabitants, will have destroyed themselves, in the process. So I think that you will say, I hope, and I think I'm right here, based on experience of the past, that we will see an increase in caution by the leaders of China, of Russia, and of the United States. I have often said that actually the most dangerous time in the world is when power tilts so much to one side that that side has no restraint on the use of its power. And I think after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we did wrong very close to what I will call the arrogance of power on the part of the United States. I think that with the tripod now reasserting itself, we actually may have a more stable world than, say, we had in the 80s and 90s.
Yes, sir. Sir, someone wants to understand your take on the diplomatic brouhaha between France and the United Kingdom regarding the fishing row. Who is coming out on top? Who is losing out in what is going on? As of an hour ago, the French government has said they want to give dialogue room. The United Kingdom has said they don't believe the French will go ahead with the threats that they have made. How do you view the situation, sir?
How can two medium European powers behave so childishly? That's what I cannot understand. These are the kind of things that happens in medium income countries in Asia, in Africa, threatening, each other and so on. But Britain and France, who are not uh, green chickens when it comes to diplomacy, to have gone so public with their differences over fishing rights. It's almost as if we were back in the um, you know 18th century, kind of naval skirmishes that you were having on the high seas at that time. I find it appalling diplomatic behavior on the part of both countries. I do understand that Macron is facing elections next year, and so there has been this, over reaction on his part to everything that he regards as an insult on French, dignity, and what have you. And on the part of Britain, and I've said this, Boris Johnson wants to be a male now, what's the name of that British Prime Minister who fought the Falklands War? Margaret Thatcher. Boris Johnson wants to be a male Margaret Thatcher. He's looking for a war, actually, to puff him up. You could even see it, in the way and manner he speaks and how he carries himself and everything. But fortunately, if both decide to go to war, it will not be a global war. They will just make, fools of themselves for a few weeks, and then hopefully wisdom will reassert itself. But everyone has said Brexit is not going to be a summer of relationship between Britain and the European Union. It's not going to be a smooth run. There were so many rough edges that were swept under the carpet just to get it done. May was very honest with Parliament and with the British people. It's the Brexit people, led by Boris Johnson and co., who kept lying to the British people about how Brexit was a done deal. No problems. Britain will be able to cope. Britain will handle all the issues perfectly, smoothly. Well, it's turning out not only the fisheries problem between France and Great Britain, but Northern Ireland. The agreement they had on Northern Ireland that Britain is saying it is going to break. Now, how do you sign agreements only for you to announce a few years later that you are going to break this agreement, and to say it with glee, as if it's not dishonorable to break agreements that you have willingly signed? It is dishonorable. So on both sides, on both the French side and the British side, I don't think there's anything to applaud, and one shouldn't join them in this game of scoring points as if it's a rugby match.
Sir, there's a question I want to put to you. I know we're at 8 o'clock, but I really do want to put this across. But before I do that, just to remind our viewers that next week there will be no broadcast. We're upgrading some of our systems here, so there will be no broadcast next week. But the week after, we will be back. So I want to throw a few questions at Prof before we go. Sir, some universities have decided to return some artifacts back to Africa, artifacts that were stolen from Africa. I say stolen, but taken from Africa. They've decided to return them. And then another university is deciding to change its name because of a donation of 155 million from someone in Vietnam. What is your take on this, sir?
Well, I think you are painting with a wide brush. You are tarnishing. I know where you are going. You are tarnishing all of us with a wide brush. Number one, no university is changing its name. I went to Oxford. Oxford is not changing its name. It is one college in Oxford, Lineker College, that says it's going to change its name because of this donation that it is getting from this Vietnamese lady. So let's get that clear. Oxford, if Oxford were to do that, I would return my degree to Oxford. But again, it's pathetic. Can you think of a Vietnamese university that will change its name, or a Chinese university that will change its name because some business person from Europe is making a huge donation to them? You don't do that. Your name and your college is part of your civilization. It's just pathetic. But as regards our artifacts being returned, I think it is highly welcome. It's to be applauded. Those artifacts were, well, I don't know. I mean, you wanted to refrain from using the word stolen. But if you take something from me, with a gun in my head, you are stealing it from me. And that's what happened when the soldiers invaded the Benin Royal Palace. But, we tend to focus on the Benin Royal Palace. Actually, throughout the period of colonialism, artifacts were being taken, were being stolen, were being smuggled out. People were being, all kind of shenanigans were taking place during the colonial period in regards to this thing. And I welcome the movement. It seems to be gathering speed to return them to back to where they came from. Now, I've heard some silly things said, like, how are we sure that we will be able to take care of them? If we were not taking care of them, would they be there to be stolen in the first place? And in any case, it's not whether we can take care of them or not. They belong to us. Now, I know that the British Parliament in 1963 passed a law forbidding the British Museum from returning those artifacts to where they came from. And I think if they insist on doing that, frankly, I think Nigeria should then decide to leave the Commonwealth. They should just decide to leave the Commonwealth. Let there be a price to Britain of
Sir,
refusing.
there is
Yes.
someone making a comment here on YouTube that returning the
Mm.
artifacts is not right. We could create a museum overseas to house them, and they pay royalty. I guess the concern there is these artifacts have been where they've been in the UK, and they've been preserved. If they were back in Nigeria or in whatever countries they were taken from, um, would we still have preserved them as they have been preserved here? And when they get back, would we preserve them?
This reasoning had come up, and I don't buy into that kind of reasoning. First of all, these artifacts have religious and spiritual values to us. You don't remove something of religious value from where they were created and where the people who created them understood their religious values, and take them to another culture and another civilization, and then say that they will have the same symbolism in the strange land. Look, I mean, I don't want to turn this program into a religious program, but do you remember, even it was made into a popular song, By the River of Babylon, where we sat down and where we wailed when the people took us into captivity, said we should what? We should sing the songs of Zion in a strange land. These are our songs of Zion. These are our religious symbols, our cultural symbols. We understood perfectly what they meant to us. Where they are, you can only look at them through the spectacles of a different culture, and not okay. I mean, I have been to, what do you call this? There is this something in England. I've forgotten what you call it now. Those stones packed on each other. Um,
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge.
Okay.
Stonehenge means nothing to me. I've been there, I've looked at them. I kind of, yes, I admire the skill of the people who put it there. But frankly, apart from admiring their skill, it doesn't mean anything to me. However, though, I mean, the English people who have studied English history and what have you, it may mean more to them than it meant to me. Supposing I now dismantle them, take them to my own country and install them, do I expect my own people to attach the same value, the same symbolism to Stonehenge in a foreign country than where they are now? So, yeah, again, to me, it's still a continuation of cultural imperialism to say, keep those things out there, away from where they were made, away from the people who made them. And we are meeting them halfway because I know that modern museums are being built um, in different parts of Africa to house those things being sent back. They may not enjoy this, they may not enjoy, I mean, the same facility as they enjoy in a British Museum. Actually, half of them are still kept downstairs in the storage of the British Museum. They are not out there because the British Museum has so many artifacts, including the one from Greece, that they don't have enough space for all of them. So I think it's a good thing to have them back. And if people want to challenge us into building befitting museums to house them, then let us build the museums to house them.
All right, sir. Um, it's 8:11, but given we're not here next week, sir, I'm going to take one more question and then
Okay.
we'll end the program. But I'm going to give you the honors of choosing between Sudan and Ethiopia.
Oh, ah, let's take Ethiopia.
Okay, so let's go with that, sir. The war is escalating. The Tigray forces are moving closer to the capital, and there is talk that what we may be looking at here is the beginning of an all-out war. Sir, we've talked about this before, but the situation is degrading now by the day. Do you see Ethiopia going fully into civil war or not?
I I pray not. I sincerely pray not. Ethiopia is a beautiful country. It's one where I have visited several times. And Ethiopia has a unique place in African history in the sense that it is one country that was never colonized by any European country. Yes, it was Second World War, just defeated by the Italians, but the war lasted only a few years, and Italy was kicked out. So Ethiopia represented, this uniqueness in Africa. It's a beautiful country. Well, all countries are beautiful, but it's a beautiful country. It is the headquarters of the African Union, a personification of African unity. And I am astounded as to what is going on. Normally, I don't buy into conspiracy theories, honestly. However, what has happened and what is happening in Ethiopia baffles me. Who are the people, and I've said this on this program before, who are the people arming the Tigray Liberation Movement, that it could take on a whole federal army? And you'll recall that at the time the federal army was actually winning this war, you know, the whole world was screaming about, what the federal army was doing. They were on the side of it. And I said it at that time that, look, NGOs, foreign NGOs, and what have you, are on the side of the Tigray Liberation Movement. And then all of a sudden, the Tigray Liberation Movement somehow got arms, sophisticated arms, that they not only brought a halt to the progress of the federal army, they now have succeeded in pushing that army back, that they are only about 300 miles from Addis Ababa. Not only that, their success has now encouraged the Omoro Liberation Movement. Now, the Omoros are actually the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia. Are we seeing the disintegration in Africa that has never, since independence, got over civil wars, militia activities, and so on, is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Since Lumumba was assassinated, they've not known peace. And the civil war in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the people who've paid the high price for it have not been the elite in the various capitals, but it's the people, the ordinary people, women, children, and of course the development of the Congo itself. That's never known any peace. That's never known any stability. Is this what is going to happen to Addis Ababa? I don't understand, but there are forces and hands behind all of these people. When I listen to the language of the Prime Minister, I shrink, I shiver. Now, I understand there's surely a problem when you translate from one language to the other, but the language which he used, and he's calling on every single person who has weapon in Addis Ababa to get rid of his weapon, that is almost calling for tragedy, genocide, because they were, to me, you and me, I cannot tell a Tigrayan different from an Omoro, different from an Amharic, but the Ethiopians can, because all the time when I used to go to Ethiopia for annual meetings of the at that time it was Organization of African Unity, which is now African Union. The Ethiopians will tell you, he is from, America. Oh, that one, oh, that one is so Omoro. I couldn't tell any difference, between the two. Presumably, like if you are not a Nigerian, whether you can tell a difference between somebody from the southwest, or somebody from the southeast, or somebody from the middle belt, you won't be able to tell. But whether Nigerians can tell, but this is calling for genocide. The UN has already issued a report that both sides are guilty of this. So I'm not calling out, the Ethiopian government troops alone. But now that we know there are militias all over Ethiopia, for the sake of Africa, I hope African leaders are going to step into the matter. Even if now the African Union is going to call for African troops to be sent under a unified command to put a stop to what is going on. But they shouldn't wait until Addis Ababa become a bloodbath.
Thank you, sir. There's a question here on YouTube. Someone is saying that maybe it's about time we start to consider moving the headquarters of the African Union out of Addis and moving it to, they're suggesting, Abuja. What is your take on that, sir?
Number one, is too early to consider that proposal. And number two, whoever said that, I don't know whether it's aware of the kidnappings and banditry going on in Abuja. Abuja is the least safe capital to move the African Union to. I just think we shouldn't even give that consideration. We should try to help them to put a stop to the war.
Another question from YouTube. Ethiopia had a civil war before. It ended with the independence of Eritrea. Now it is Tigray. What is the central government not getting right?
You see, there has been Ethiopia started off as a monarchy, and that monarchy was brought to an end by a military dictatorship. That military dictatorship was overthrown by a collection of militia. And this will be the first time they will be having a democratic election. So really, Ethiopia has never had an organized constitutional conference where all stakeholders that make up Ethiopia will sit down and have an ndaba. And ndaba is a Swahili word for what Africans normally do when they had difficulties. Before the Europeans came in, you sit under a tree, elders sit under a tree, and they argue issues until they get agreement through sheer exhaustion. And I think there are a lot of African countries also never gone through this. We're all just lucky. We're all just lucky that what's happening in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, has not been the lot of a lot of African countries. But there are a lot of them who systems have just been imposed on the countries and things are bubbling under. We've had our own civil war. We still have our own disagreements and instability in Nigeria. In Ivory Coast, they've gone through a civil war. And of course, I've mentioned the Congo. Uganda is a dictatorship, a military dictatorship that is sitting on top of the system there. Sudan is there bubbling. So what is going on? What's going on in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, which is symptomatic of a lot of the majority of African countries, is they have not had a system arrived at through a consensus.
Sir, thank you very much. I know I have kept you more than before, but we're not here next week. And I just wanted to make sure that the participants and our viewers had your take on some of these issues. But thank you so much for your time this week. We obviously will be back in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Bye
And
bye, sir.
peace.
And thank
Bye-bye.
you to our viewers. Thank you for all the comments, all the questions. It's always great when those questions come in because it's more engaging for Prof as well. So thank you so much. We will see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.